they anticipate that people are feeding them. I guess I could always do the disclosure of you really shouldn't be feeding the ducks when you come to a pond. It's bad for the water quality. When they realize we're not going to feed them. So this pond is really part of the fourth largest river system on Long Island. So Long Island has a couple of major river systems. Most of the most people think about the Carmen's River, the Connecticut River, the Peconic River. But this river right here, the Carl's River, is really the fourth largest river. And I know this doesn't look like a river. We call it Southards Pond, but this is really a river. And this water starts all the way up in Wyandanch, really just north of the Ronkonkoma train tracks, flows down into the first park it comes to is Geiger Park. And that park also has an impoundment. So it has a pond there that holds back the water, fills up the pond, it spills, flows all the way down into Belmont Lake State Park. And again, Belmont Lake State Park, really still part of the Carl's River system. That lake is there again because of impoundments or dams that were put in place. Then it flows out of those spillways down underneath Sunrise Highway, underneath the Southern State Parkway, all the way to this location, to Southards Pond, where there again is an impoundment. When I talk about these impoundments and dams, they're really put in for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's aesthetics. So as this one flows out of here, flows all the way down towards Babylon Village, it flows into Argyle Lake. Argyle Lake also has a beautiful impoundment, a beautiful dam that then spills out and flows into the Great South Bay. That's an example of a dam or an impoundment that was put in place strictly for recreational reasons. This one, as far as I can tell, this was put here in place initially to run a mill. These were also put in place for ice. So before we had refrigeration, they would harvest ice as it froze here, store it in underground ice houses, and be able to access that ice here. And Belmont Lake was also put in really recreationally, sometimes for irrigation, farming. Once you kind of change the flow of the water, it changes the ecosystem. So rather than being a creek or a river system that flows through, carrying nutrients from higher up all the way down out into the Great South Bay, and then in return, as fish and tides come up, carrying nutrients and minerals further up into the system, every time there's an impoundment, it kind of chokes off the river in both directions. So these rivers, rather than flowing clean, will start to hold more debris, will start to be shallower as they fill up with organic matter. They'll heat up more, and then they'll start to see species change. So in a river like this, or in this part where Southards Pond is stocked, this will have fish in it now. Instead of having, say, alewife or trout, this has bluegills and pumpkin seeds and largemouth bass, catfish, carp, yellow perch in here. And those you really wouldn't find if this was flowing as a cold water river. The water that you see is mostly our exposed groundwater. So this is essentially the water that's underground. These are depressions. Often these river systems are remnants of the outwash plain and the flowing meltwater from the glaciers. So flowing from the glacial moraines in the north. But these impoundments do create a lot of problems, and people like them because they say, well, it's always been here. It's always been this beautiful park. But the reality is that these ponds, these lakes that really dot the South Shore now have not always been here. These traditionally would have been a flowing creek. A good example, if you ever want to see the effects of dam removal, Westbrook Creek in East Islip had a dam failure about a year ago. And you go down and take a look and see what happens when you restore a river flow and the native species that return to that area. As I'm talking, the chat room is open, so if you have questions, you can post questions into the chat room. Robin will interrupt me from time to time to ask some of those questions. That's really the best way. If you have a question for me, I can try to answer it.
Thank you, Peter.
So let's get some questions ready. So we're not seeing, one of the things I was hoping to see while we were here was some osprey. Osprey, we've been doing scavenger hunt around the scavenger hunt. Osprey are a large fish hawk. As a fish hawk, you'll often see them circling above water, and they will watch fish down below the surface and dive in. In the about hour we've been here, I have not seen a single osprey. So what we're going to do is I'm going to move away from this water. We're going to take a walk along the trails, talk about some of the different species that are here, some of the different things that we're seeing. So I'm going to take the camera so you don't have to look at my face anymore. But if you have questions, please put them into the chat room and Robin.
Hey, Peter, can you talk to us about the birds and the that we would find on the lake? Particularly, I'm interested in knowing about the swans. You know, they are beautiful to look at, but are they native to the area?
So yeah, that's a great question. The swans are back out in the middle now, and I see some of the cygnets, the young of the year. No, they're beautiful to look at. They're large, majestic, incredibly powerful birds, but they're not native to here. And they create a real problem. They're very aggressive in their nesting. Oh, there's one right here. And if you look what he's doing now, that his entire head goes down under. So what he's doing now, it's called dabbling. So he's filter feeding. So with his beak, he sticks his whole head down. And with that really long neck, he can reach further down and feed in more places in this pond than our native ducks would. So our native ducks that are dabblers, let's say if we used a mallard, for example, you'll see them tipped up with their tails in the air. So they can dabble the plants that are there, but when there's swans in a pond or a lake system, they really outcompete those native birds. So they're eating, obviously is a much bigger bird, they're eating a lot more of the plant matter that's there, and they're also eating the shallow and the deep water. So they really outcompete them. And then they're aggressive for nesting. So if there are other native species who would want to nest on here, like say wood ducks, if wood ducks were in the area, they would chase them off and not allow them along the banks where they may want to forage and walk. So while beautiful to look at, not great for diversity of an ecosystem. I hope that answers that question.
Great. Thank you, Peter.
Sure. And you should, they're another one you shouldn't feed. I see people with their children trying to get close to feed swans. A beat of their wings is powerful enough to really shatter bones. I wouldn't recommend trying to get close enough to feed a swan or any duck. So I'm going to take this so you don't look at me. And we're just going to let some people walk by, and then we're going to walk along. So
Peter, we had some pretty strong winds yesterday. How's the damage over there in the forest?
Well, here, I don't have to go far, so I can turn around right here and show you some of the trees are already down. So the winds were strong. There are trees down all throughout this. This looks like one of the red maples that came down. So maples are on your scavenger hunt list. Maples become easy to identify because as you start to look, they start to have opposite branching. And if I can find a good spot, I'll find one on another one that we can see better. And we're going to walk along. But if you look, there's the people on the trail. There are trees and debris down just about everywhere. I can see that the town has come through and already done a great job pulling away a lot of the dangerous debris and the big stuff that they could get out. But there are occasionally a large tree, like this locust tree. It's locust or maybe a walnut, too far away to tell, that has fallen completely across the trail. So as we come down.
Some of my favorite things to look at in the Southards Pond, I call it artwork, are exactly this, the root systems when a tree does fall over and stays in the pond area.
Yeah.
I love to look at these root systems.
Yeah, you know, as you can see as we walk, there really is a tremendous amount of debris, and I'm hoping to catch some of our pollinators in action here on the spice bush. Oh, there we go. So up high, let's see if he moves for us. I don't know if you guys can see. I see one of our native bees. So our native bees really rely on these native plants to pollinate, and they'll work it. I don't know how many people feel like they're afraid of bees, but our native bees are solitary, meaning they don't have a hive, they're not protecting a queen, and we're not talking about hornets, we're talking about bees. Because they're not protecting a hive, you can get very close observing them and not have fears of being stung. Oh, and here's another good native. So
While you're walking along, Peter, Corinne asked, how deep is the lake?
So that's a good question. Because it's an impoundment, I would venture to say it's not very deep. This particular one, I don't know for sure how deep it is. We see some of the other ones, usually 10 to 14 feet. Yeah. But it's a guess for Southards Pond. I don't know. Sorry.
I found some information from the Historical Society from their walking tour map states that it is in most areas 5 feet deep.
Yeah, so very shallow. They always joke a lot of them you could walk across. Here's another.
I just want to state that we do not recommend walking across the lake.
No, we do not.
Yeah. The bird right there. Can you make it out?
Oh yeah. Looks like a blue jay following us along. Looks like an immature blue jay. I'm sure that's not going to show up on the camera, but there he goes. Yeah. So lots of jewelweed and mugwort. The jewelweed's always a cool plant. It's this one here with these yellow flowers on it. You usually find these around where there's poison ivy. This is a good, we say a good antidote for poison ivy. If you get the oils on, you can rub this, help kind of reduce the oils. It's one of those long-running wives' tales, whether or not that's true. But the cool part with jewelweed is when they're all really blooming, their seeds are explosive. So if you touch the flower, it fires off the seeds. We're a little too soon. It's another beautiful one. This is nightshade. So this is in the tomato family, or the tomato is in the nightshade family. But this one in particular, as beautiful as it is deadly. So this is not one you'd want to eat or rub on your skin, but deadly if you ingest it.
Is it deadly for animals as well?
I don't know. I would keep my dog away from eating it, but I'm not sure. I know for people it is. And then I don't know if anybody was able to find any garlic mustard on it, but here are the seed pods on our scavenger hunt. Here are the seed pods from the garlic mustard. Let's see if I can find any with some mustard seeds on it. There we go. So if you pull these pods off, if you see these long hairs, and you rub them, there's your mustard seeds in there.
Garlic mustard is highly invasive, correct?
Highly invasive, yeah. So there's never one, right? So they're all over. They kind of take over and spread. That's pretty good. We'll walk along. Ooh, some good smells. What does that smell? Horse droppings.
Yeah, I just asked in the chat room, Peter. I love this bench right here that you're passing. I just asked in the chat room how many people have actually walked the trails, and several people have said they have, and they love to see the horses in there. That you've mentioned, just north of Sunrise Highway, we have the Babylon riding stables, and the horses ride the trails in here often. It's a great.
Yeah, they leave their remnants behind. So there were just a jewel wing dragonfly, which again would be hard to show, but if I could get it close enough, or you can see, hopefully you can see some of the native bees on the jewelweed flowers there. So this flowing water, these are part of the outshoots of the Carls River.
Now, are you walking the West Trail or the East Trail, Peter?
So we are in the middle trail.
Okay.
So I'm not on the bridle path. So I guess I'm on the Western Trail, where this veers back into the Eastern Trail.
Mhm.
That makes sense to anyone where I am.
You just passed a tree with had some bumps on it. Can you explain what those bumps are on those trees?
Yeah, most of these bumps on these trees are typically burls. Sometimes you'll see these as a reaction to fungus, but this particular one, this is probably reactions to branches being broken off when it was growing and are scars. So these are a little different from like we might see the big burls on a black cherry tree. So if you've ever seen those large, some of them, occasionally you'll see some ooze coming out of them. And I didn't see any black cherry trees here. Oh, now this fuzzy vine that's here.
Oh,
It
yeah.
goes up the tree. This is not anyone's favorite, I would imagine. Yeah, don't step any closer, as I hear from my production team. But one stem, 3 leaves. Any guesses from anybody on what this is? You want to guess?
Poison ivy.
Poison ivy.
Yeah,
So that is
there you go. Bean
poison
just said
ivy.
it. There it is. Poison ivy. Bean. Good job.
So one of the ways to tell poison ivy, now obviously I'm not going to touch it, is the center leaf is symmetrical and these satellite leaves are asymmetrical. So if we folded this one in half, same on both sides, but the 2 satellite leaves are uneven. So that's one of the ways that you can use to identify it. And people will often confuse this with a raspberry. Raspberries will look somewhat similar to poison ivy, but the raspberries have thorns on them. Poison ivy does not. And people will also confuse it with this guy. This one has 5 leaves. So this is Virginia creeper. And both of these are, you know, I don't know if I want to use the term good native plants, but they're good native plants. They provide food and habitat for other species that use. But you can get poison ivy from the leaf. You can get poison ivy from the stem. This red fuzzy vine growing straight up the tree is poison ivy. You can get poison ivy from that. Most of the green you see up above me is poison ivy. If it was raining hard and we stood here long enough, we could get poison ivy.
Wow.
What about what? From the roots, yeah. And Kieran has said you can also get it from the roots. So if you were to dig this up and hold the roots, you could also get poison ivy. And if you don't know, you get a reaction from the oils that are on the plant. And those oils interact with your skin and cause you an allergic reaction. Not everyone reacts to poison ivy, and some people react much worse. But if you felt like you touched poison ivy, the best thing to do is as soon as you can is to wash the spot with something that's a strong soap. I always say anything that breaks down oil would take the oils off of your skin. So like a dish soap is perfect. And then kind of once you wash your skin, you can't get poison ivy again. So that old thing like, oh, if you have poison ivy, if you touch it, you're going to spread it. As long as you've washed, you can't spread it.
Gotcha.
But if somebody was to say, kick it with their feet and get the oils on their shoe, and then mama picks the shoe up later and puts it in the closet, she could get poison ivy from that. So it will last on the surface of an object.
Hey, Peter, Corinne asked if you happen to see some poison oak. Could you show us what that looks like?
I would, but we don't have any poison oak on Long Island. So it's really just poison ivy. Poison oak is really the best that I know west of the Mississippi River, that we don't really have it here on Long Island. I've never seen it or heard of it here.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So this is a tree that's down, but this is another one that was on the scavenger hunt. This one's great, and because these leaves are off a branch that's broken, I'm going to feel comfortable popping some of these off. So we get this one, and this one's kind of cool. Here, if you want to hold that for a second, I can show these. So This one,
Sorry.
we want it to be cool depending on the time of year. I could say this looks like a dinosaur footprint, or we could say if it's fall, it looks like a ghost. This tree also has another leaf that looks like a football. And then if I can find an example of the third leaf, let's see, somewhere on here, lots of ghosts, but it will have a leaf that looks like a mitten. Oh, there's one maybe. Nope. But instead of having the two lobes and the three branches, it only has two. And of course, on this one, let's see. You see one? Oh, that's not one. That's not one. Lots of good footballs. Wow. So he's going to break my record.
This one right here. Is that one?
Let's see. Oh, yeah. That's one. It's a little bit smaller, but you can see
Turn it in.
just the one lobe on the side. Oh, there's a really big, good one. I'm going to step in and grab you. There's a much better example.
Yeah.
So you get the three leaves. The one that looks a dinosaur footprint or a ghost, one that looks like a mitten, and one that looks like a football. And what's really cool is if you were here and I crumbled up this leaf and I let you smell it, depending on your age and what you eat for breakfast or whether you clean the house, for most people, this either smells like Fruit Loops or like Lemon Pledge, which is strange that they would both smell somewhat the same. Yeah, you could smell that. And their smells a little different easily because of the rain. So if you're ever out in the woods, pop one of these leaves off and give it a smell. Then the other cool thing is this is the tree if you've ever had sarsaparilla or root beer, and it's real sarsaparilla, real root beer. It would be made from the roots of this tree. And if you were to pull it up and smell the roots, they would smell like root beer. I don't recommend doing it because then of course you've killed the tree. But if you are ever harvesting sassafras roots, you can make yourself some root beer.
Hey, Peter, I just want to jump back to the poison ivy for a moment. Beans Hunt asked, does this mean poison ivy acts like bacteria?
No,
like the way it's spread?
No, it's an oil on it. It's a urusol. So it's really just an oil, and then that oil just causes an allergic reaction, like a histamine reaction on your skin. So it's really strictly just an allergic reaction, not like an antibody reaction that you may, I guess, would get from if it was a bacteria. So if that answers it. People running by. Oh, let's see, here's a good maple. So here's the maple, and this one's really easy to see, that opposite branching. So, so maple, oh, went the wrong way on the trail, somebody. So maples are one of the few maples and dogwoods that have this opposite branching. So it makes it really easy to identify a maple tree over some of the other trees that we may see here. So this whole maple above us. So if you're ever out and you're looking, you're like, is that really a maple? Just look for those opposite branching. Then of course, those maple leaves with the multiple points on them.
So Peter, how old would you guess that tree is, the maple tree is that you were just looking at?
This one's not as old as you would think. This is probably 20 years old.
Oh, really?
This one looks like a red maple, so this one would grow a little bit slower. There are some here. We saw quite a few of the Norway maples. Those grow much quicker, and would fill up the canopy space faster when a tree falls. So one of the cool things that happens in a storm like this and a tree like this, it's kind of a perfect example here, is it opens up the canopy. It creates these holes. And then some of these understory species that are here, like the Norway maples, we'll use that as an opportunity to grow faster than the red maples would and fill that space and take over an ecosystem. So these storm events really create these big openings and this kind of battle for sunlight here.
So Brian asked if you could you maybe zoom in again on the maple tree and show what the opposite branching means?
Yeah, so here's this is another maple right here. So this is the opposite branching. So where you have one branch, you have a matching branch next to it. Where if I went over to, this is really a shrub, but other trees, like say an oak tree, it would be like this. They would be alternate branching, where you'd have one branch here and then a corresponding branch further away. So this would be alternate branching, and the maple again would have that opposite branching. So anywhere there's one, there's a match to it, unless of course it's been broken off.
Great, thank you.
But if you see that opposite, then it's maple. And here's another one of the invasives that'll fill over the sunlit space. Now you can see it already taking over the ferns that are here, but this is Oriental Bittersweet. And this will really start to take over the space very quickly. You can already see it here climbing up.
When you say it's invasive, Peter, does that mean it was imported or it came, somebody planted it there? How does it get there?
So invasives get here in a lot of different ways. So some of them are brought here that people think, oh, it would be great. Here's some poison ivy. It would be great to have that plant here. So they get it, they sell it at a nursery and bring it in and plant it. I'm doing the lecture on the scavenger hunt, yeah. Oh, fun.
Tell them they only get points if they attend.
Yeah. Yeah. If you attended my lecture, you would have got extra points. Oh, sorry. And then occasionally invasives come in, I don't want to use the word naturally, but they'll come in ships. They'll come in other ways. So they'll come in on people's feet. They'll come in packages, where a lot of them were bought in and planted because people liked them as an ornamental, or they had them somewhere else in the world and thought they would be great to have here.
Can you explain what the implications are of invasive plant species?
Yeah, so the invasive plants, it's a big one. So, I'm just gonna let that guy talk to himself for a minute. I don't know if you can see that guy.
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful dragonfly there. I'll get back to the invasives. Can you see that dragonfly? Am I too close?
Very cool.
So these guys are great. These are the ones that are here eating your mosquitoes. And these dragonflies are incredible predators. So they catch the mosquitoes on the wing, so while they're flying, and then they eat them while they're still flying. And their 6 legs, their legs are kind of set up like, I always say, like a catcher's mitt. So they're able to really grab their prey in the air, and they're incredibly maneuverable, from flying quick to a quick stop. I know it's so hard to focus on it.
Are they attracted to specific plant types? So if I have a mosquito problem in my backyard, is there a plant I could plant to attract dragonflies?
No, it's you just need insects and some open space for them to fly, depending on the species. This is a small one, so he's working the trails here. Sadly, I don't have my glasses on, so I can't identify him because I can't see him well enough, which is also why I couldn't tell if it was in focus or not. So I don't know if you can really do anything but have some open space to attract them. They do like to be around water to lay their eggs, but it needs to be water that has kind of a silty bottom so that their eggs can settle in there. But the implications of invasives like that Oriental Bittersweet is that it grows so fast, no one really eats it. It's very, very hardy. And in a space like this, it will really start to outcompete everyone else that wants to grow here. So all of the slow growing natives, oh my goodness, hey, look at this. Well, this is something else.
Wow, this is a really great surprise.
That's a freebie. Wow.
Wow. That's unusual, right, Peter?
Yeah, I would say that that is highly unusual. It's probably not great for the fox. So this is a red fox. He might be out of sorts because his home could have been wrecked in all of the storms.
Right.
He looks very healthy. As you can see, they're not really big, not much bigger than a cat. And there he goes off into the woods.
They're very
Yeah.
helpful in controlling the rabbit population, correct?
They are. They're pretty good. They're good predators. They're more or less solitary. They will take down rabbits and really looking for small rodents, moles, voles, your field mice. To see one trotting along during the day down the trail in front of us is unusual.
Yeah. I
But
have seen
very
them
cool.
before on the trails. I don't know if it's the same one, of course, just once or twice. But usually
Yeah.
they're really close to the edge and run right away when they see people.
Yeah, he was in no fear, just trotting by. So sorry, way distracted by the fox. So those invasives outcompete. So while our native plants may grow slower, may have more competitors, these invasives can come in and just outcompete them. We always say a lot of our North American species were kind of reset in the ice age. So, Long Island is not a place that's been here for very long. 18,000 years or so since the last ice age, things have been evolving to live in this climate. A lot of the invasive species that are coming in are coming in from places where they were at 100,000 years since their last ice age. So they're much more adaptive, much more successful in their growth. And then as they outcompete the locals, they take over the entire ecosystem, make it much more less biodiverse. And then a lot of the species that are relying on, let's say, acorns, aren't able to find it because the bittersweet has overtaken areas or some of the other species. So just using bittersweet as an example, that's how invasives can cause problems.
Thank you.
And
Okay, so I have two questions here. Do dragonflies lay eggs in still water or only moving water?
it's a great question. As far as I know, and I've seen, they're looking for still water. So they're really looking for ponds. And then the eggs that they lay. So next time you go by a pond, especially this time of year, you'll see dragonflies circling the pond. They will fly in and dip their tails. And every time they're dipping their tails, they're laying eggs into the water. Then those eggs will settle down, and some of them potentially stay in there 5 years as larvae before they emerge and transform into the adults that we see. And then some of the larger species, like the green darners and stuff, will migrate away. So if you can see all the debris down. If you're down at the beach, say come in like 2 or 3 weeks, you'll start seeing dragonflies migrating along the coast. And those dragonflies are not there to lay eggs. Those dragonflies are migrating south for the winter, which is awesome to watch and see. And then the small falcons will follow behind them, the kestrels and merlins, to eat them.
So Red Lap asked if they maybe had spotted some catbrier. I've never heard of catbrier before. So if you happen to see it, could you zoom in on some?
I will, yeah. So catbriers, there's a lot of poison everybody. This catbrier, this is Oriental bittersweet as I look into. But catbrier is essentially that wall of thorny vines. I mean, I think right now this is mostly bittersweet through here, but this would be what catbrier would look like. The catbrier is much thinner vines, like where the Oriental bittersweet is really big. And if I put my finger next to this, you can see those thorns are big. The catbrier thorns are smaller, much more annoying. And in different places of the country, they call it slow down weed, because if you get stuck in it, it just makes you slow down. Some people call it the holy weed, because when you get stuck in it, it makes you pray.
So Peter, we've seen some swans. We've seen actually a red fox, a rare sighting. What other kind of animals could we expect to find in this area?
Here's some capriar. So in here, mammal-wise, I'm sure there's some cats in here, which is not great for the ecosystem. And there's lots of garlic mustard here. But you would see rabbits in here. I'm sure you would see, if you could find them, moles and voles. I'm sure field mice. Moving up into birds, you'd see a large collection of woodland birds. I would imagine that there's great horned owls in here, although we haven't seen or heard one. There's most likely screech owls in here. There's gray squirrels in here. I imagine that there's especially because I'm seeing so many hickory trees. Oh, did you see that one that just flew above us?
No, what?
Big bird just flew and landed, of course. But because we're seeing so many hickory nuts, as I'm looking for what this bird is, I'm sure that there's a very large collection of flying squirrels in the woods here.
How about bats?
So normally I would say there are
You said flying
absolutely.
squirrels?
What was that?
You said flying squirrels?
Flying squirrels, definitely flying squirrels, especially with so many hickory trees in this woodland here. So this woods are really dominated by red maple and hickory. Walking through here, and those hickory nuts, the flying squirrels love them. So if you're ever in here at night, and I don't think you're allowed in here at night, but flying squirrels are true nocturnal, so they're not crepuscular. So this time of night right now is starting to get into crepuscular, that twilighty time of day. But they're true nocturnal, so they come out at night. So if you get out at night, especially now late August into September and October, and you hear nuts falling, especially if they're hickory nuts or if they're acorns, and you hear some peeping in the trees, like those are your flying squirrels. And if you can get a good spotlight, you'll most likely see one, because they're curious and they'll run over into the light. So I'm sure that they're here. The owls are here. I'm sure there's red-tailed hawk that are in here. And then we've seen snapping turtles in here. There's box turtles, chipmunks. Chipmunks I haven't seen, and I haven't seen any real evidence of chipmunks, but I would imagine but I know this is great habitat for them, but they can be outcompeted if there are other large rodents here.
How about raccoons?
Raccoons for sure. Raccoons are on the scavenger hunt. So I don't know if anybody did find a muddy raccoon print on the water side.
Well, people have submitted photos of the
That's great.
tracks.
So it's perfect timing, because I'm right here where we could find raccoon tracks. So raccoons come to water to feed because they wash their food before they eat it, really because they don't make saliva. So their mouths are so dry, they wet their food. You can see all these freshwater clams here. So especially where there's a muddy bank, they'll walk over and wet their food, and you can often find their handprints. And you can tell a raccoon paw print because they have a thumb. That's why they can open your garbage cans and wreck all your stuff. It's because they have that thumb. So if you're ever on a good muddy bank, and of course I don't see one here, and you see those little handprints in the mud or in the sand, those are your raccoons.
So Red Lap said there is actually a resident great horned owl that sometimes roosts in the trees of neighbors who live nearby.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
especially there's I would say there's no better sound than being woken up at night to a great horned owl calling and hearing one call back.
Bean said she saw a yellow bird today. Could that be a cardinal?
So that's a good question. No, if you saw a yellow bird, it's definitely not a cardinal. So the male cardinals are that really deep red, and the females are brown. That's because the females sit on the nest really exclusively. So they like to be nice and camouflaged, and the boys showing off. But if you saw a yellow bird, depending on the size and if it was all yellow or if it had some black on it, if it had some black, it was probably an American goldfinch. But if it was all yellow, there's a couple of different species of warblers that it could have been. And I don't know if you can see, there's one of those jewel wing damselflies. So we were looking at a dragonfly before. The dragonflies keep their wings out to the side when at rest. I'm sure you're not going to be able to see what I'm looking at. Let's see if I can zoom in. I don't know if that looks good or not. But that is a damselfly, and they keep their wings up behind them. Their bodies are much more delicate. Where the dragonflies will go other places to feed and really only come to water to lay eggs. The damselflies really live their whole life at the water's edge. And somebody runs by.
Are the female orioles also yellow?
No. The males are like that orangey yellow. No, the females would be brown. Am I right on this? I could be wrong.
We're not going to question your knowledge.
Don't
You're very greatly informed on the flora and fauna of the Southards Pond.
Yeah, so I'm going to start to wrap it up. We're just about back to where we started, so we've kind of done a circular loop here. If anybody has any last minute questions, I'd be more than happy to answer those.
So I certainly have a question. Can we get you back to do a true nature walk with us?
Yeah, I mean, this is fun and it's great. I know it's different, but yeah, it would be great to do this with actual people and show them. And as great as this is to see it, you miss the smells.
Right.
It was interesting that we saw the fox when I had said earlier that we smelled something. We were smelling the fox. It's kind of like a skunk smell. People often, it's not as strong as a skunk. Strange. It almost smells like somebody smoking marijuana. And so you kind of get that scent of it. And it's usually, it's not strong. It doesn't stay. It passes by. And you get that smell because the foxes are just trot around and mark their territory.
Gotcha.
Okay. This is a.
I was going to ask, are there woodchucks and crows in this area?
Crows for sure. So there's definitely crows here. Groundhogs, woodchucks, I don't know. I haven't seen any evidence of it, and I would venture to say most likely not. Only because, like I said, the Southards Pond, the Carls River that you see here is really our exposed groundwater. So while the ground is dry right here, just a couple of inches away, it's wet. So for an animal that's a burrower, they would potentially, in this corridor, have a very hard time finding anywhere dry enough to build a sustainable burrow.
Yeah. So, Peter, a couple of other questions. Are the foxes dangerous if you run into one?
Well, are they dangerous? No. Could they bite you? Yes. So I kind of answer that question weird. And you could see small depression has water. You should never approach one. You should never approach any wild animal. You should assume that every wild animal will bite you. If you went close enough to that fox and tried to touch it, it would bite you. It would most likely run away before you were able to get close enough. And if they were coming close enough to you, it probably means that either people are feeding it, or it's sick. So I would stay away from any wild animal that you encounter. Enjoy viewing them from like the distance that we did with the fox, but they're fine, and let them do their thing and you do yours.
So Peter, you had talked earlier about the impoundments and why they were originally put into place. Brian Paisley had a question. Is there any movement in our area to open up the dams and let the creeks? I know this is a touchy topic in some areas.
Yeah, you could look at Westbrook Creek. Like I said, in that East Islip corridor, we've put comments about it. They're on our website at seatuck.org.
Mm-hmm.
So you could read some of our positions and our policy positions on that. Ideally, these impoundments are not serving any real purpose anymore. We don't need mills. We don't need ice ponds. Of course, some of them where they're there purely for recreational reasons and people are enjoying the recreational aspect of it, then they're playing that role. But removing them would benefit the ecosystem. You would save money on the cost of maintaining these artificial ponds. As they silt up and they fill with invasives, they need to be dredged and cleaned, which is expensive, as I walk through some poison ivy. So yeah, the impoundments are definitely not a great plus for the ecosystem. Recreationally in places, yes, but for the ecosystem, no. So our position on a lot of them would be to remove them. And here, down at Argyle, Seatuck worked with the town of Babylon and was able to have a fish ladder put in, and that allowed 100-year-old remnant run of alewife to access the upper parts of the Coral River for the first time in over 100 years. We'd like to see the same thing done up here at Southards Pond and up at Belmont Lake, and allowing these alewife and eels to move further inland, bring their nutrients that they carry from the ocean with them. All of that would be beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. I know there is the fish ladder down at Argyle has a camera installed. I'm not sure if the camera feed is live yet or not, but definitely keep everybody posted on that coming out.
Yeah, and the alewife are done for the year running. The young of the year will start running. But the alewife. What? I'm sorry. What was that?
When do the alewives typically run?
Typically, we see them in April.
Okay.
All right, and then any other questions? It's a beautiful spot to stop.
No, I would like to say thank you to everybody in the audience. You were very active with your questions, and we thank you for joining us this evening. And again, thank you so much, Peter, and your wife and son, your production team, for joining us today. Your knowledge is, hey, Kieran, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Your knowledge is tremendous, Peter, and we really appreciate your sharing it with us. I just want to mention to everybody that Peter had helped us put together the scavenger hunt that's running on Goose Chase through Saturday. There are a couple of small prizes to win from local merchants. You can still register for the scavenger hunt on Eventbrite, or you can go directly onto Goose Chase. Being that you participated in this hunt, we'll tell you. Go to Goose Chase, search Southards Pond for the game, and the code is Conklin House, all lowercase. Again, it runs through Saturday at 5 o'clock. And we hope you enjoyed this program today. And we'll keep you posted. We hope we can get Peter out for a live run with us. So thank you very much, Peter, for joining us tonight.
And thanks, everybody. The questions were great. You can go and send us emails at Seatuck. My email address is pwalsh@seatuck.org. Hopefully you have enough knowledge to come in here and take a hike on your own and find everything that was on the scavenger hunt. So thank you again for joining us. I hope it was informative. Have a great rest of the week.
Thank you, Peter. Have a good night.
You too. Thanks, Robin. Thank you for having me.
Okay, bye-bye.